The moment my wife saw the number on my bank account, she looked at me as if I had become a stranger. She didn't ask where the money came from. She didn't ask why I had kept it hidden. She simply pushed her phone across the table and said, "I want a divorce." I thought my marriage was ending because she believed I was poor. I never imagined it would because she believed I was hiding millions from her. What she didn't know was that the balance she had seen was only part of a truth I had spent years protecting. The evening my wife discovered my bank balance began like any ordinary Friday. I had just come home from work, changed my clothes, and started preparing dinner while Claire sat in the living room using my laptop. Her own computer had stopped working earlier that week, so I had told her she could use mine whenever she needed it. I didn't think twice about it. I had no idea that within a few minutes she would discover something that would completely change the way she looked at me. I was standing in the kitchen when I heard her call my name. Her voice sounded different, not frightened exactly, but serious enough to make me stop what I was doing. When I walked into the room, she was staring at the laptop screen. I immediately realized what had happened. I had forgotten to log out of one of my financial accounts. The balance was visible on the screen, and Claire was looking at it with disbelief. She slowly turned toward me and asked, "How much money do you actually have?" I didn't know how to answer, because I had never expected to have this conversation that way. I told her that the money had come from years of saving, investments, and a small ownership stake I had in a logistics company. Instead of being relieved, she became more upset. She reminded me of all the times we had discussed saving money, delaying vacations, replacing old furniture, and keeping our monthly expenses under control. From her perspective, I had allowed her to believe we were simply getting by while secretly building a fortune of my own. I tried to explain that the money wasn't sitting there waiting to be spent. Most of it was invested, and I had been working toward a long-term plan that I believed would eventually benefit both of us. But Claire didn't hear it that way. She asked why I had never told her about the account. I admitted that I had wanted to keep the details private because I was planning something special for our future. That answer only made her more suspicious. She looked at me with disappointment and said that after 12 years of marriage, she couldn't understand how I could keep something so important from her. I reached for her hand, but she pulled away, and then she said the words I never expected to hear from the woman I had planned my future with. "I want a divorce." For years, I had a reason for saving money that Claire never fully understood. It wasn't because I wanted to become wealthy, impress anyone, or keep something from my wife. My relationship with money had started long before I met her, during a period of my childhood that I had never liked talking about. When I was 17, my father lost his job unexpectedly. 1 month, everything seemed normal. The next, our entire family was calculating every dollar before spending it. I remember watching my parents sit at the kitchen table late at night, going through bills and trying to decide which ones could wait. My mother would sometimes put groceries back at the store because we had gone over the amount she had planned to spend. Those memories stayed with me. I promised myself that if I ever had a family, I would make sure they had something to fall back on when life became difficult. As I grew older and started earning more, I became disciplined about saving. I didn't spend every raise I received. Instead, I put money into investments and built an emergency fund. Eventually, I was offered a small ownership opportunity in the logistics company where I worked. I took the risk, and over the years, that investment grew far beyond what I had expected. Claire knew I was saving, but she didn't know how much I had accumulated. I never intended to deceive her. In my mind, I was protecting our future. I wanted us to reach a point where a sudden job loss, medical bill, economic downturn, or family emergency wouldn't destroy everything we had built. I also had another reason for keeping quiet. I wanted to surprise Claire. I had found a beautiful house near a lake that reminded me of the peaceful life we had always talked about. It wasn't a huge mansion or a symbol of wealth. It was simply a comfortable home with a garden, a quiet backyard, and enough room for us to enjoy our later years together. I planned to use part of my investments to buy it without taking on a large mortgage. I imagined giving Claire the keys on our 15th anniversary and watching her face light up. That dream made the secrecy feel harmless to me, but I failed to understand how silence could look from her side. While I saw myself as someone quietly building security, Claire saw a husband who had apparently been making financial decisions without telling her. Every time she had worried about money, my silence had given her no reason to believe there was another story behind it. And when she finally saw that account balance, all those years of uncertainty suddenly seemed to confirm her worst fears. After Claire told me she wanted a divorce, I honestly thought she would calm down once she had time to think. I believed that when she understood where the money came from and why I had saved it, she would realize that I had never intended to hurt her. Instead, the situation became more serious with every passing day. That night she moved into the guest room and barely spoke to me. The next morning, she packed a small suitcase and told me she was going to stay with her sister. I stood by the front door, watching her leave, still hoping she would turn around. She didn't. Over the following days, our conversations became almost entirely about finances. Claire wanted to know exactly how much money I had, where it was held, and why she had never been told about it. I tried to answer every question honestly, but she was already convinced that there had to be more. She told me that she felt betrayed because she had spent years believing we were living within a certain financial reality, while I apparently had another life hidden behind the scenes. I reminded her that our household bills had always been paid from our shared account, that I had never taken money away from our family, and that I had never used our savings for myself. None of that seemed to matter. In her mind, the secrecy itself was the betrayal. A few days later, she contacted a divorce lawyer. When she told me, I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. 12 years of marriage suddenly seemed to be reduced to bank statements, investment records, and questions about who owned what. I wanted to fight for our marriage, but I also knew that chasing her or arguing every point would only make things worse. So I gave her the financial documents she requested and agreed to let the process move forward. During those weeks, the house felt strangely empty. Her coffee cup was still in the kitchen cabinet. Her favorite blanket was still folded on the couch. Photographs from vacations were still hanging on the walls, but the person who had shared those memories with me was gone. I kept thinking about all the ordinary moments we had taken for granted. We had laughed over bad movies, celebrated birthdays, helped each other through difficult workdays, and made plans for the future. Now all of it was being questioned because of one number on a screen. Claire believed I had created a secret financial world without her. I believed I had been quietly building a safer future for both of us. Neither of us seemed capable of seeing the other's perspective. Then her lawyer requested complete financial records, including the investment accounts, company documents, and the separate savings account I had created years earlier. And that was when the story began to change in a way neither of us had expected. When Claire's lawyer began reviewing my financial records, I expected the process to be uncomfortable. But I didn't expect it to reveal how completely she had misunderstood everything. Every account had to be documented, including my investments, company shares, savings, and the separate account I had created years earlier. At first, Claire was convinced the records would prove that I had been hiding money for selfish reasons. But as the documents were examined, a different picture began to appear. The large balance she had seen on my laptop wasn't simply cash sitting there waiting for me to spend. Most of it was connected to long-term investments and the ownership stake I had built in the logistics company. The money had grown gradually over many years, and I had never used our household funds to create it. Then the lawyer found another account. Claire hadn't known about this one at all, and when she saw the amount inside, she immediately assumed it was another secret fortune. But the explanation was completely different. I had been putting money into that account specifically for our future family. Years earlier, Claire and I had talked about having children, but after several difficult experiences, we eventually stopped discussing it. I never blamed her for what happened, and I never wanted her to feel that she had failed me. Instead, I quietly continued saving because I still hoped that someday we might have a child or find another way to build the family we had imagined. I wanted to make sure that child would have opportunities, a good education, and a stable home. When the lawyer explained the purpose of the account, Claire reportedly sat silently for several minutes. Later, she asked to meet me. We chose a quiet cafe where neither of us had been before. When she arrived, she looked tired and emotional. She sat across from me and asked, "Was all of this really for us?" I told her the truth. I had never created those accounts because I wanted a life without her. I had created them because I wanted a life where we wouldn't constantly worry about money. Then I pulled a folder from my bag and placed a photograph on the table. It was the house near the lake that I had been planning to buy for our 15th anniversary. I explained how I had spent months researching it, calculating the costs, and making sure the purchase wouldn't put us under financial pressure. Claire stared at the photograph, and her eyes filled with tears. She finally understood that the secret she had interpreted as betrayal had actually been connected to a future I had been quietly trying to build with her. And the question she asked next was one I had never expected to hear from her. Claire looked at me across the cafe table and asked, "Can we fix this?" I had imagined hearing those words many times during the weeks we had been apart, but when they finally came, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to reach across the table, take her hand, and tell her everything was going to be fine. Another part of me was still hurt by how quickly she had decided that our marriage was over. I couldn't simply forget the moment she had looked at me and demanded a divorce after seeing one bank balance. I told her that I still loved her, but love alone wasn't enough to repair what had happened. If we were going to try again, we needed to change the way we communicated with each other. Claire agreed. We decided not to rush back into our old routine. Instead, we started attending counseling together. At first, the sessions were difficult. We had to talk honestly about things we had avoided for years. Claire admitted that money had always made her feel insecure because she had watched her own family struggle financially when she was younger. She had interpreted my secrecy through those fears. I explained that my childhood had shaped my own relationship with money in a completely different way. I had believed that saving quietly was an act of protection, while she had experienced it as exclusion. Neither of us had intended it to hurt the other, but both of us had allowed assumptions to grow. We started changing small things first. We opened our financial accounts together. We created a shared plan for investments, savings, spending, and retirement. I promised that there would never again be a major financial decision she didn't know about. Claire promised that she would ask questions before assuming the worst. We also learned to talk about difficult subjects before they became arguments. Several months later, we returned to the lake house together. I had originally planned to surprise her with it, but now I wanted her involved in the decision. We walked through every room, discussed the price, and talked about whether it truly fit the life we wanted. Claire smiled when we reached the backyard. She said she could imagine us sitting there years later, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise. We eventually decided to buy the house, but this time there was no secret surprise and no hidden plan. We made the decision together. Looking back, I realized the bank balance had never been the real problem. The real problem was that I had mistaken secrecy for protection, while Claire had mistaken secrecy for betrayal. We nearly lost 12 years of marriage because neither of us stopped long enough to ask what the other person was truly trying to protect. And when we finally began asking those questions, the numbers in our accounts mattered far less than the trust we were slowly learning to rebuild.